that. Cool. All right. One of the things I said to whoever it was about this is, we'll go through this now, but it's going to be recorded and we'll share it. We found a lot of the sessions at this conference, people are watching them later. So it gets a life, you know what I mean? Way after stuff.
I saw it's available for like a year.
Yeah.
Right.
Like mm-hmm. All right. Carolyn, you got anybody? Waiting room as well? Any of that? Good. Okay. All right. Well, people will come. People come when they come.
I did not enable the waiting room, so people are just coming in.
All right. We will record this thing. Okay. And then we'll put it on our YouTube channel. I'll send it to a bunch of people too. All right. Let's get started, shall we? I can't see everybody, but there we are. Well, hello and welcome to everybody. On behalf of Preservation North Carolina, I'm Gareth Evans. I'm the director of the Bellamy Museum in Wilmington. And I'm a PNC employee as well. It's good to have you here. We're going to take an informal look at what is a transforming space in downtown Wilmington. It's a panel discussion, a food demonstration, and a tour all in one go. And we are, well, I kind of wonder if people who are on here, and even if you join it recorded later on, you need to have a cocktail in hand, perhaps, when you're watching. I am going to share my screen for a PowerPoint. And then after I go through this little bit of housekeeping, I'm going to introduce our speakers, or our panel, I should say. All right. The housekeeping part, if you will, I think just everybody mute, unless you're the panelist who's going to talk. That will be very handy, particularly during a video session later. Everything is being recorded. It'll be available to view for about a year at least for all conference registrants on the Bellamy and PNC YouTube channels. What we found with these Zooms is that if you are having a technical problem or anything like that, there's a chat feature down the bottom of the screen. Tap that and ask people. I can't necessarily answer it, but somebody will be able to find you the way through. And that's been very handy. So we call this program Preservation and Plates. And it's about 1 South Front Street, which is going to be Dean Neff's new Seabird restaurant. It looks very, very good. I went by there yesterday and work is continuing apace. This session is sponsored by Maurer Architecture. And I got to thank, and I will introduce and let them give you a little bio on the people who are here today. First up, Dean Neff.
Hey there, my name's Dean Neff. I'm the chef and owner of Seabird Restaurant, opening hopefully February-ish of 2021.
And next up we have James Goodnight.
Hey, I'm James Goodnight. I'm the owner of the building. Trying to get this thing right.
And Laurie Jackson.
Hello, thank you, Gareth. I am Laurie Jackson. I am a partner with Maurer Architecture. I've been working on this project with James for several years, and I'm thrilled to be able to share this with you guys today.
Okay, and Patrick DiRito.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I'm with the interior design firm Smith Haines Studio, and we've been working with Dean and Laurie and James for the past year now to come up with this design, and we're very excited to see it get built as well.
Joe Choi on the shot the video with Dean that we'll be seeing later. I think Smith Haines on as well. Well, also is part of the design, owns that design firm as well, so maybe he'll chime in a little later. How this works is that 35 minutes we're going to discuss the history, the food, the renovation of the space, and the design elements with these panelists. And we follow that with a video Dean's put together. He creates a cocktail, the signature cocktail that we're talking about today, and an oyster dish, which looks really, really good. Then he takes a quick walkthrough of the space in that video. It ends, and I transfer back to us, and if there are any questions, we can do a Q&A at the end. So let's get started on the PowerPoint. Everybody see everything okay? Cool. Dean, do you want to start with sort of why you're happy to have located this restaurant where you are and that kind of thing, the vision for it?
Yeah, so I opened up a restaurant called Pinpoint, which is downtown as well, and moved to the area, the Wilmington area, in 2015. And it was interesting moving into Wilmington. I didn't know farmers. I had to kind of make all of these connections with the people that would be supplying food. And so a common thing, we would hear while we were renovating Pinpoint and getting ready to open was people would poke their head in and they would say, what kind of restaurant is this going to be? And I kind of oftentimes would find myself, because we hadn't made all of those connections, at a loss for words, because really the people, the farmers define the food, and the fishermen define the food. And, did that for 5 years, and getting into kind of the food culture here in town, I was really blown away just at how much great seasonal seafood is in the area, and was really inspired by that. I had been sort of landlocked for, 15 years. I grew up in Savannah, but spent a lot of time sort of in the Atlanta and Asheville area. And this was kind of when we found this building it's beautiful. It's in just a really central location. And I knew that local seafood had to be sort of a key defining feature of this restaurant. So that's, the look of the building, the size of it was right. And that's kind of, what the beginning part of it.
I forgot to mention, if you have any questions, can you put them in chat at the bottom of everybody's muted. So if you want to do that. Here's that image of downtown Wilmington, just to give you an idea of proximity to water.
I'd like to point out that picture that's back in the building was bright pink.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the picture though. Google Earth is fantastic. We're going to get into the history with everybody in a minute, but because it's a restaurant, right, we'll get into the building. I did want, because it sounds phenomenal, there's 2 pages of what Dean is proposing to be the menu. Do you want to talk through some highlights a second?
Sure, yeah. Again, like with this restaurant, I've had about 5-6 years of living in the area. And in that time, we've had a big focus on oysters and oyster farming in this area. It's kind of blown up. I think there were maybe just, a handful to begin with. And now there are a lot of really wonderful oyster farmers in the area. And we definitely want oysters to kind of be a key component. We've got the great thing about oysters, similarly to wine, is that you've got, different tastes based on the location of where they're being farmed. And so, the salinity levels, they kind of take on a flavor based on the location of, where they are, which makes them distinct and unique and interesting, almost like wine. So we will serve lots of raw oysters. For sure, that'll be a big component. Also like doing several different versions of baked oysters, different types of oysters like that. So oysters are going to be definitely a key feature on the menu. Aside from that too, we've, celebrating seasonality of seafood in the area. Ayden, North Carolina has a great catfish farm, and it's a more sustainable type of farm-raised catfish, which is really clean and wonderful. This smoked catfish and oyster pie, I think, is one that was kind of a story of a friend of mine that I did a cooking class with, and she had roots in London, and we kind of collaborated on this reimagining the cuisine of London, and we did a cooking demonstration and kind of came up with this smoked catfish and oyster pie. It's got braised cabbage, it's got root vegetables like parsnips and celery root, and then we do sort of a potato crust on top, and you bake it. And we use the base as a smoked cream, so we smoke cream with applewood, And that dish is something that I think is going to be really fun. It's all, I mean, very much North Carolina. Love skate wing as well. That's something that I think, people are, I think, starting to appreciate it. But for a long time, it was kind of considered to be stingray, like kind of a throwaway fish, or people talked about how they would punch out, scallops, fake scallops out of stingray wings. I don't know if that, I think that's kind of a urban legend, but skate wing is really delicious. We have some, we don't really get it as much in North Carolina, but it's sort of a regional thing. And so want to focus primarily on North Carolina and the region. And then occasionally we'll pull from other places to bring exciting ingredients to the menu. But I think place is the absolute most important part of creating a restaurant like this. You really want the food of the area to define the things that you're putting on your menu. So I could go on and on, but
I know. I was going to say that the one thing that I noticed is on there, something called Benton's Bacon, which you put me onto, smoked bacon years ago. Everybody in the office loves that. Highly recommended to everybody. That's good stuff. So James and Laurie, do you want to tell us a bit about the building?
Sure. Well, James, I'll jump right in there. As Dean mentioned, this location is truly in the center of the city. The historic grid plan was laid out here in Wilmington in 1737, and it remains intact. So Market Street has historically always been a place to buy goods, typically associated with the river and the trade there. And then Front Street obviously is fronting, 1 block away from the water. So even though this particular building, which was constructed in 1920, has not been in this location as long as some of the other buildings, a building has been at this corner since the very beginning of Wilmington's founding.
James, what attracted you to, what made you buy in this sort of area?
Well, like Laurie said, that's the 50-yard line downtown. Let's see, I think I bought that building 5 years ago, and it had 2 dive bars on the first floor and a 3rd dive bar on floors 2 and 3. It's not the best welcome when you got to downtown for a lot of folks. So it seemed like an easy place to make a big impact on what downtown looked like.
I've spent some time in those dive bars, but yeah, okay.
I have too, but for others in the call.
You can't always knock a dive bar. 3 floors.
Yes. There's no shortage of dive bars in Wilmington, we've found. But I think, again, historically, this area kind of plied sailors with food, drink, a good time. So it seems to be in the makeup of the place.
Well, the port was right at the end of Market Street, that top left picture. You see where the building is. The port was right there on the river, so yeah, exactly what you just said. Anybody want to talk a little bit more about the history of this?
Well, I can say it's interesting, that picture that you've notated with the arrow. You can see that is not currently what we have there on the corner. In the building's current configuration, there are arched windows on the 3rd floor. So I think that this picture was probably taken before what we know as One South Front today was built. There's also the possibility that it was added onto on the 3rd floor, and just within the plan of the building itself, there's almost a seam where it looks like it could have been added onto in the northern direction as well. you can actually see in the photograph to the right of that historic photo, that is our One South front. You can see those arched windows on the 3rd floor. We really did not have any photographs of the arched entryway on Market Street. So that's always been a bit of a mystery to us.
Right. I was going to say that it could have been modified, right? That was one of the ideas, or heavily modified, as a lot of these buildings were. Although it's kind of ironic and gives you an idea that they're putting out a fire in that one in the top left-hand corner, which was kind of a feature over the years.
Yes.
I threw this one in there just because it's the corner. It says 135 on a lot of these, up there, top left of each one of these images. Sanborn fire insurance maps give you a great idea. The dry goods is DG that was in there. There's also in the 1910 one, it has a staircase, which I think you uncovered during the renovation, and we'll get back to that in a bit. It's just the multiple uses, a wholesale hardware, bottom right in 1955. You just go through the fact that this building is sort of a group of 1, 3, 5, and 7, you know, and now it's just one South Front as the address, but it's been through a bunch of different iterations over time.
And historically, you can see from these, it was always kind of a sister building to what's now 9 South Front Street, which is also the Solomon Brothers. And we uncovered some bricked up openings. We reconnected, kind of putting the 2 buildings back together upstairs.
Right. So it's
Yes. It appears that, well, whatever was on the corner was destroyed. 9 South Front was built, and then our current iteration of 1 South Front was built. So even when we were doing demolition, I know Christopher can get into this, but the foundation walls of the building that was previously on the site are still there intact. This building foundation just sort of worked around them.
Laurie, you sent me this one. You want to talk about that?
This is one of my favorite pictures of this building, oddly. It's, you know, it was the 70s. I'm not sure who thought it would be a good idea. And I think that this is actually an aesthetic treatment to the building. I don't think this was for repair work being done, but you can see the first floor has been modified pretty extensively. And this is a good view of 9 South Front to the south, which has remained a little bit more intact, but I think this was taken during a time when the downtown area was had gotten a little seedy, if you will. If you can see some of the names of the establishments, that gives you a good indication of sort of where the neighborhood was at.
Yeah. The 1961 one where I put that wrap, it's still wrapped, that building. It's kind of a feature. They had a couple of buildings downtown that looked like that, including one opposite it. It's a terrible idea.
Was that part of the 1957 renovation, Laurie? Do we know?
I think this one might have been a little bit later, James. But that's metal cladding on the first floor. They punched a lot of openings for a new storefront, etc. So for a long time, this was really all we had in terms of documentation of that storefront, because it has been modified pretty extensively. This is just for fun. Little homage to primarily the whiskey, but we'll throw River Rat and Goodfellas in there as well. I don't know if anyone local has had the good fortune to be able to see a show at the Whiskey, but they were actually a real gem in downtown Wilmington. They were there for 16 years in that location, and the first floor was split into two tenant spaces. So the whiskey had the one to the south and a variety of other bars. Lastly, the River Rat had the space to the north. And then Goodfellas was located on the second and the third floor of this building. I actually do have a photograph of the dress code for Goodfellas. You can see it was a very classy joint. And we've got some photographs of that as well. But in looking at some of the images and just thinking about this presentation, I do think that the whiskey was a really important part of this building's history. Up until
I really like the whiskey, but we were trying to do an office tenant upstairs, and if they're doing sound check at 3 in the afternoon, it's not very conducive to getting work done. So they moved out last fall, and in hindsight, I think October 2019 was a great time to get out of the live music business.
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, we move on a bit to the renovation. Now, Christopher can come into this a bit, but I know that Laurie wanted to talk about this particular slide.
Yes, thank you. So James found these photographs. Wilmington has a great resource, the North Carolina room at the new Hanover County Public Library. Beverly Tedderton has worked there, as I understand, for many years, and she is a fixture in history and preservation in Wilmington. These are the only photos that we have of that western elevation of the first floor. And this is also a great photo. This was taken during the Feast of the Pirates, which only occurred, I believe, for 3 years in the 20s. It was just sort of a free-for-all.
Yep.
Contests and lots of costumes. Gareth might be able to add a little more.
It was sort of a small town Mardi Gras kind of feel to it, I think.
Yes, but I think it was great for tourism. I think people came from all over and really had a good time. But I love these photos. One, you can tell that the crowds are integrated. You can see on the one in the upper left-hand corner, the signage for the Solomon Brothers store. There's a shopkeeper there in the middle of that upper photo watching the parade pass by. So the lower photo just shows the southernmost part of the building. So when we were designing the new storefront, which is based on this historic documentation, we were very careful to kind of pore over these photographs and figure out, what the spacing was. Was it wood paneling in the bulkhead under the glazing? And we even found a local glass artist, Enchanted Bill, who is constructing these prismatic glass transoms for us. Those are no longer made, but we figured out, Bill really figured out a great way to get a replication of this using two different pieces of glass turned 90 degrees. So there's that same kind of depth and texture, and we're really excited about being able to bring that back.
Trying to see if this is the inside, of that elevation out there. See if you can see what's going on there. I don't know. Anyway, Christopher, do you want to weigh in on something about how the renovation got started and some of the things in there? I've got a number of slides on that.
Yeah, so the photograph in the upper right there before the exterior was painted, that was obviously right after the windows. We pulled out the old aluminum, typical aluminum, like kind of storefront windows that had been there for some time, and through other photos, found the details of what was there back in the 20s, and so ordered the new windows to match those and installed those. But in that upper right photograph, it doesn't show there because I think we had taken it down by that time, but we took out of the second and third floor we took about 100,000 pounds of garbage and trash and layer upon layer upon layer of building material. And it all went out of a single window and on the third floor, and the trash chute was set up for several months, and we had a dumpster that was down below. Periodically it would come in and out, and we just loaded all this material out. I mean, but we got through, like I said, layer after layer after layer, and it revealed a lot of the original finishes. You know, ultimately in the ground floor, we found what was left of the tin ceiling. On the second floor, we found tongue and groove beadboard throughout, a maple floor on the second and third floor, former openings between 1 South Front and the neighboring building 9 South Front. You know, just as we got through and took away those tens of thousands of pounds of trash, we just found all kinds of original stuff that was there, somewhat intact, and certainly enough that we could get a sense of what the complete finished package was like on the interior that we could document with photographs and are in the process of putting back together now. And I've also, you know, finding, say, like the tongue and groove, it's a certain dimension, a certain thickness, and we've taken that to local wood manufacturers, and they've been able to either have knives on hand or create new knives that they could actually reproduce those finishes and sell them to us, and we can install them in the space. So like that, you know, that, for example, on the upper left, there's a photograph of just how it all kind of piecemeal came apart and got taken apart. And then you have kind of almost in the same view in the bottom left. It was not quite a pre-post, but I mean, that's what it looks like now in the bottom left. So yeah, it's just been a slog to get through the first few months, but it's nice to see it all come out and see what you have to work with and get started on putting it back together and get it ready for what I always say, the next 100 years. You know, make it durable, bring in data and electrical and mechanical, and conceal all that, and sprinkler, and just make it smart and ready for the new, for the next century, basically.
Is that office space up there on that floor?
It is. Kesselboomer is a manufacturer. It's a cabinet part manufacturer. They make pullouts for kitchen cabinets. It's a German company, and this is their North American headquarters. They're on the third floor, and they have a large manufacturing and distribution center over in Leland. So they occupy the entire third floor of both 1 South Front Street, right above where Seabird will be, as well as next door in the third floor of 9 South Front Street. So on this photograph right here, you know, between the River Rat and what we're doing right now, James and company had Anchor Light, an art gallery, come in, and they stayed there for a year because the lease for the whiskey had not concluded yet. So there was about a year space where we had the River Rat done, and then since nothing else could really exist in the space or do anything with the space until the whiskey was done, we had Anchor Light in there for a year. So in that process between River Rat and Anchor Light, we did get in there and pull out all of the old River Rat stuff, and found, you know, as Laurie alluded to a little while ago, we found like 2 different, and we had seen this on the second and third floor, but similarly on the first floor, we found 2 different buildings that were put together back as one, and they were put together ultimately with scabbed on pieces of wood to get the floor levels consistent. But there were kind of 2 distinct buildings within that one. You can see it through the second and third floor. You can see differences in brick and where that lead-in wood is, where you would attach for plaster finishes and things like that. You can see it in the ceilings. You can see it in the columns, but it was interesting to see all the way through floors, starting on the third, down on the second, the first, how it was two buildings that were built kind of at 2 separate times. And again, you know, on the first floor, pulled out the grid ceiling, and we knew this was up there because we had done some work in the elevator and and the elevator lobby that's on Market Street, and in the process of doing fire alarms and stuff like that, we had gone through the ceiling of the first floor above that drop suspended ceiling and knew that those tin ceiling panels were up there. So it was just nice to be able to finally get all of that stuff out and see what was going on. And then the stairwell in the bottom right, that was a stairwell, I think that was mid 50s, if I'm not mistaken, Laurie, right? Mid 50s, 57, that area was installed, and you can see it has the kind of a flavor of a 1950s aesthetic, because that didn't exist when the building was, in the 1920s when it was originally built or rebuilt. That wasn't there. That came about in the 50s when they actually added the elevator. So on this photograph on the upper left right there, you see that that's a girder actually that has joists attached to it perpendicular to that girder, and there are, I think, 2 or 3 nails there. And after we pulled out all of the finishes and the floor finishes in the second floor bathroom for a very large section, I'd say like probably, I don't know, 12 feet by 12 feet, the entire second floor was held together at this connection. And so luckily there was, by the grace of several layers of Durock and vinyl and tile and things like that, it held everything together. But I was envisioning a point where you could probably, in that Goodfellas bar on the second floor, I was just kind of thankful in hindsight that I was picturing like a bunch of fellas in there drinking at the bar and in the bathroom and like jumping up and down a House of Pain. I was thinking, my gosh, it would have been almost so easy for this entire second floor bathroom to have crashed into the stage of the floor below, into the whiskey. But it was all held together by, the layers of tile and Durock. It was all cracking and falling apart, and these 3 nails. So, and then I also want to point out the center lower photograph. That's on the Betancourt Alley side of, so on the south side of 1 South Front is 9 South Front, and on the south side of 9 South Front is Betancourt Alley. And all of the utilities for 1 South Front, a full building away, all come from this alley, with gas primarily and electrical. And one thing that we realized was that everything above this very dangerous rat's nest of medium voltage wiring was, the mortar joints were falling apart and water was intruding into the interior, and there were some things rotting out, but you could not get to and this is, I think, important for a lot of buildings in historic downtowns, and we've done this on other buildings downtown. But when you have a condition like this where you have all of these overhead wires, you can't get to what's above it. You can't repoint, you can't waterproof, you can't restore, you can't maintain it. So we went through a pretty extensive effort, which actually led to the city of Wilmington going ahead and restoring all of the services in the entire alley, because we really needed to get all of this stuff run underground, which we did. So we cleaned it up, brought in more power, brought in new gas lines, and then we could finally ultimately do all of the repairs on that elevation on the exterior. And now it's easy to restore going forward. It doesn't have these hindrances in the way. And then
I hope you kept those 3 nails for good luck, by the way.
Oh, geez, we could have put that in the museum. I don't think we kept it. And then
lucky chance. And then who wants to talk about the one on the bottom right?
This is the 3rd building downtown in which we have found human remains, and it's no secret. It shouldn't be shocking or a secret really to anyone that when you have a city as old as Wilmington, they're just, people were just buried, maybe as they laid, as they were murdered. I don't know, but their body parts all over downtown. So in the process of excavating, and Laurie mentioned earlier too about the original foundations that were in the crawl space below Seabird. When the buildings were built and rebuilt, they didn't go to the effort of removing all of the existing old foundation walls. So we have found those and have to clear those to get new, because for a restaurant, there's a ton of new piping to install. So so in the process of demoing those old foundation walls and creating pathways for new electrical and new plumbing and new gas, sometimes we excavate up bones. And so it's kind of our standard practice now that whenever we find bones that really appear human oriented, we call the police. And so this is a couple of months ago. We called the police just as a matter of course, and told them we had found bones that were really old, that had been there for a long time. And we had an ambulance show up with 2 EMTs, and they came in, and we had this crowd of people just sitting around taking these pictures of these like 3 or 4. I think it was I can't remember which part of the anatomy they were from, but it's like, it was a thing. It was like a to-do, and they were quite bored that day and just stood around, and the EMT stuck around for a while and hemmed and hawed and thought, I'm like, you guys aren't going to try to resuscitate, are you? And it's just one of those, we find them. So they took their photographs, their glossy photos, and they're in a file somewhere at this point.
Nice. Lots of, family burial grounds around downtown too. So
They're more places than people realize. Yeah.
All right. Patrick, do you want to have a word about what the design vision, and maybe Dean as well on this bit?
Yeah. We met with Dean probably about a year ago to start this project, and we're trying to figure out with everything that he wanted to do what the space would look like. And then Smith and I visited last November and saw the space, and we knew, having met with Laurie, that there were some considerations we wanted to keep for historic reasons. Like we knew we wanted to keep the historic tin ceiling, and in the back there's a historic wainscoting that we wanted to keep. But when we were on site, we sort of laid out some preliminary floor plans and tried to feel out the space and where the bar would go and where the seating would go and what would make the most sense. And we sort of, while being on site, realized that this is where we wanted the bar to be. And it's a little U-shaped bar in front of the windows, right next to the front door. So the first room you walk into would be this sort of bar room. And we're not, I think it's a Wilmington law where you can't have open liquor bottles in the windows. So we did this sort of big liquor rack above the bar, and that's going to glow both up and down. So that whole thing will be glowing. And on the right, we decided to repurpose the same style of tongue and groove board that we found on the space and put a wallpaper above it. And then in the back, we're keeping as much of the exposed brick as possible and sort of plastering over the CMU where it will be visible. And then, so these are some of the elevations that we were drawing and some things we were inspired by. That giant naval boat in the harbor, one thought that we had with this space was instead of building walls to try and create different rooms, because we have the bar room, the main dining room, and a private dining room, we're using a series of these 3 bookshelves in the bottom left that will be 10 feet tall by 8 feet wide and 2 feet deep. And they're all going to be this glossy red lacquer. So that will sort of divide up the space instead of using walls, because it is a sort of a small, intimate space. And we also want it to sort of be able to switch between sort of morning coffee and breakfast to lunch to a late night dinner and drink.
Cool. All right. Which brings us to, very handily, Dean, do you want to describe what you'd set up for today?
Sure. So this cocktail, I got a text message from James, and he heard this World War I historian mention SRD rum, and so he looked it up, and it was apparently rum supply that was on these British boats in World War I. And there were rations of 2.5 ounces that would go out for British soldiers that were in need for whatever reason that might be. And it got all these different meanings, and I think one of them was seldom reaches the destination. And so, which means that when the rum, the urn of rum, James actually found this old urn photo of it. We need to figure out how to get it in the restaurant so we can store our rum in that. But we needed a rum drink at the time. And, a lot of recipes and a lot of, I think the most fun, things you come up with in the food world are from collaborations with other, with people. And this is definitely one of those. We needed a rum drink. And this kind of got me to really sit down and figure out what would be a tasty rum drink. There are several, rum drinks that I love. And so I kind of brought in aspects from different rum drinks that I like to make this kind of its own thing. But we've got Gosling's dark rum, and we're using a little bit of ginger beer, which is kind of like a dark and stormy. And then we've got the maraschino, the Luxardo, which is a maraschino liqueur, which kind of ups the booziness of it. And also, kind of is sort of like a Hemingway daiquiri, but super easy. You just have to make this little syrup at the bottom. And that's, hopefully you guys will be making that. And then we've got the baked oysters with shrimp and a little bit of blue crab and lemon. Just a really simple baked oyster preparation that's really delicious. It's almost like a take on oyster bienville, but we leave out any bacon or mushrooms, adding in crab. Right now it's officially oyster season, which means there are people harvesting wild oysters in this area. Farm raised oysters are year round, but I thought it would be appropriate to kind of show a demonstration on baked oysters. And I think that's about it. We got the recipes there. Do you want to talk about the sign really quickly? That's our
yeah, go for it.
Our Seabird sign, which will probably be going up on the Front Street corner of the building, hopefully in the next maybe month and a half or 2 months. And we're just really excited to be a part of this event and really thankful to be here. It's nice to have everything kind of documented and something we can kind of really delve into, the ins and outs of this project. It's been really cool. So I hope you enjoy the video.
Cool. So what I'm going to do now is stop this sharing a second and go mix yourself a drink, whether you're watching it now or in whenever. It seems that right now it's a Friday afternoon. It seems perfectly fine. And we'll do this little walkthrough that is part of the video as well. So let me quit that. Let's see. This is where technology comes in. I will say, the fact that this is coming through the internet and you're sharing via Zoom, whatever your settings are on your computer and whatever your internet connection is, that affects what happens with the video we found during the course of this. So bear with us on that. I have to share those two things. All right. And if you would mute yourself as well, you can also, I think, turn off your video if you want to do that too, if you are on there. So here we go, 28 minutes of cocktails, cooking, and a walkthrough.
All right, so what we've got here, we've got a shaker. We're gonna add in a few ice cubes into here. And we're gonna take our dark rum. We're using Gosling's. That's kind of what you would find in a dark and stormy. And we're going to use 2 ounces of that. Got that going in. We're going to do about 1/4 to 1/2 ounce of the maraschino liqueur. That's been soaked with muscadines or cherries, or you can even just do it plain if you'd like. We're going to do 2 ounces of our pineapple, lime, and ginger syrup. Add that in. And then we're going to use, we've got the special bitters that we made here with pomelo leaves. And we used, as the foundation for this, we used some of Trey Herring's 7-year aged bourbon, barrel-aged bourbon, obviously. We're going to do a couple shots of this into there. And then we're going to stir it up. We're going to put a few ice cubes here into our glass. Do 3. Stirring that up. Now we're going to pour it right over the ice. And then we're going to bring it up to the top with a little ginger beer. If you wanted to use spicy ginger ale, you could do that as well. Bring that up to the top. And then we're going to garnish with, like I said, you could garnish with fresh mint. We're going to use a little fresh basil. We've also got these somewhat dangerous pomelo leaves that have some pineapple and some of those maraschino muscadines on there as well. Make it a little dangerous and festive. Put that in there. Lost pineapple, pop it in there. And there we go. Ready to drink. All right, everybody, it is oyster season here in Wilmington, and it's really oyster season year-round because, you know, we used to hear that only months with an R are the months when you can enjoy oysters, but oyster farmers in our area have really been bringing us great oysters year-round. The wild season will be opening up, but there's so many great things that you can great ways you can enjoy farm-raised oysters these days and kind of taste, you know, differences from all over the country. These oysters in particular are from our friend Matt Schwab. His oyster company is called Hold Fast Oysters, and he actually used to be a bartender back when I was a managing partner and chef of Pinpoint Restaurant, and he stopped bartending and went and started his own oyster farming company, and his oysters are wonderful, and it just kind of shows you the level of care that goes into really pristine farm-raised oysters. These are basically available year-round. There are, you know, certain things that'll happen, like storms that'll make you know, oyster, the water can change, you know, quality, and they will kind of go out of season briefly, but for the most part, they're in season most of the year. But you notice that they put a lot of care. These are super clean. If you get oysters that are a little dirtier, you can kind of brush them with a clean hand brush. Brush out the hinge. That's where dirt likes to hide and mud. The other thing about storing oysters, when you take these home, make sure and don't ice them down. I know a lot of times you will see them in the shops in ice, but typically we like to just keep them super cold. And the other thing you want to make sure is keep cup side, you know, facing up. And the reason for this is that there's a lot of really great liquor in these oysters or ocean water. And if you turn them upside down, these things are still alive and they'll continue to kind of open and close. And what will happen is that water will drain out. And that's really something you want in an oyster. And you can tell an oyster has been cared for properly by how much of that liquor is actually in the cup still. One way to know without opening them up is to bang them together. We all know what something, you know, what it sounds like when it's really hollow. That would be a sign that there's less liquor in that one. This one's a little bit, but still, these are, you know, they're going to have a lot of great liquor and ocean water in them. Something else that's really unique about oysters, like wine and grapes and food in general, is that, you know, oysters are kind of a time capsule of where they are grown. And so they close up and, you know, the ocean water is sealed in with the oyster. And you really want to make sure, that's kind of one of the more enjoyable things about an oyster is being able to taste that salt, fresh water. You know, with clams, typically, you know, a lot of people will think, you know, you purge oysters. You should never purge oysters, but definitely purge clams. They're kind of two different, you know, two different worlds, because clams tend to hold on to a lot of sand, whereas oysters don't. So we're going to go ahead and demo shucking a few oysters. All right, we're going to go into this hinge. Mud likes to hide in this hinge, so after we pop the oyster, we want to make sure and wipe off the mud from the tip of the knife. Try to avoid that. We're going to come in here, cut this top muscle, like that. And then here we've got to cut this other muscle here. Going to go down to the bottom of the shell, just remove that. You notice we didn't go in super hard when we're going into the hinge. You don't want to pop this. If you pop this sack right here, it'll deflate. That's where a lot of that good ocean water lives. And it's ready to go. These are great, obviously raw. You know, we are going to create a topping that is a really fun, versatile topping. You can use crab meat, you can use shrimp, you can use lobster, and this recipe, I think, is a kind of a combination of, it's actually kind of like Oyster Bienville, but there's no mushrooms and there's no bacon. So it's pescatarian, and it's kind of a great year-round oyster. It also will go really well with that cocktail we made. We've got a little bit of spice in this, and so that rum cocktail will actually be really kind of a wonderful counterbalance to something that's has a little bit of spice and heat to it. So we've got about 6 oysters here, and we're gonna go ahead and start our oyster topping. You can see these oysters too, they really fill the shell. Really beautiful oysters. Getting to know, you know, we have some great oyster farmers that actually go out to our local farmers markets here, and you know, all of the oysters that you get from different farms, they all taste a little bit different, so it's kind of cool to go out and try those. So here we've got our pot. We're going to get our shrimp base started off, and what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a little bit of butter. And what we're going to do is this is going to be the butter that we actually make. We're going to make a roux in the pan. And so this fat right here is actually going to work as our fat for the roux. And so we're getting this melting in the pot. We're going to add in, we've got a ½ cup here, and you've got a recipe at home so you can follow along. These are shallots. You could use yellow onions or red onions if you like. We've got some shaved garlic here as well. We're going to add this in. And we just want to really lightly saute this, bringing out all those flavors. We're going to add a little salt. We've got some salted plates here for putting oysters on when we're finished. It'll hold them upright. When you're presenting these oysters, it's good to have either an oyster plate or something that will keep them upright so all that topping stays in the shell. All right, those are starting to smell really good. We want them to turn translucent. You notice we just shaved the garlic. We didn't mince it up. You can mince it if you prefer. If you can shave it really thinly, I kind of like that because it leaves these really thin chips. You could use a razor blade like they do, I think, in Goodfellas, if that's how you like to cook. So we've got that. Now we're going to add in a little bit of our chilies. We've got chili flake. You could use standard chili flake. Aleppo pepper is great. We've got a little bit of smoked paprika in there as well. We're going to mix that in. Next, we're going to add in our flour. This is what we're going to basically create. This is creating a roux. The roux is going to thicken this topping. We're going to cook out the starchiness just for a minute of the flour, and you can see all of the flour kind of mixes in nicely with the melted butter. There's no clumps, it's nice and smooth, and you get this roux that forms with your shallots and garlic. It's coming together. Next, we're going to add in, we've got milk and cream. We're going to add that in. This is a really simple recipe, and it's really something that you could even have prepped up the day before. If you're having company come over, you can kind of get this, make it, chill it, and then top your oysters and then bake them in the oven or broil them. All right, so we've added this in. Next, we're going to add in our lemon juice. We don't want to add in the lemon juice until that roux has mixed in with your cream and milk. And the reason for that is if you add in your lemon juice too soon, you can actually kind of curdle your milk. The roux kind of helps keep it from curdling. We've added that in. We're going to add in now our minced peeled deveined shrimp. That goes in. We're going to add in some herbs as well. We've got a little chopped oregano. We've got some chopped thyme as well. And we've got a little bit of lump crab meat. You don't have to add this, but I think it goes really well with this topping and with this recipe. And we basically are just adding that shrimp at the very end because we want it to just barely, cook until it's nice and opaque and cooked through. But again, we are going to broil this, so we don't want it to be, if it's a little bit underdone, it's okay. So we're going to let it go for just a minute longer. Like so, and then we're going to get ready to top these oysters. All right, so now we're going to top our oysters. We've got, you can do this again, the recipe I believe is for your oven. I like to use a Searsall and broil them. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat this up for just a second. You can buy one of those on Amazon. So we're going to go over and heat the oysters once over first. Then we're going to add our hot topping on there. And then we're going to put some of the breadcrumbs on and toast afterwards. And basically it's going to be ready to go at that point. If you wanted to finish with the roasted shrimp heads and the palm oil, you would just drizzle that over the breadcrumbs before toasting it. So we've got, this is starting to heat up. You can tell when it starts to get red. And we just want to kind of bring it over the tops of these. These broilers are great, but they do take a second to heat up. And so kind of lightly warming these. That's another thing I think, these oysters they were in the water yesterday. And so when shucking oysters, make sure and, use all of your senses. If something doesn't look right, throw it out. If it smells bad, throw it out. Typically, these oysters, being that they were in the water the next day, you will rarely find one that's in bad shape. And so that's why I really recommend, if you can use an oyster farmer that you know personally, that's a great way to go because they can tell you exactly when they were in the water. The other thing is making sure not to overcook the oysters. Oysters can really shrivel up and kind of get tough if they're overcooked or left in the oven for too long. So we just want to get these nice and hot through, but not get them to where we're killing them and they just shrivel up. All right, those are starting to get really nice and starting to change color. We're putting this topping on. You can see the topping is still hot. We're going to finish this with a little bit of breadcrumbs. And again, like I said before, if you wanted to have this, set these up the night before, cover them up tightly with plastic wrap or a cover, and then have them ready to go so when, people show up for your backyard socially distanced party, you can heat them up and set them out on the back porch. This time of year is great for oysters in general, especially for a broiled dish like this. It just feels really good to eat oysters when the weather's starting to get cool, especially a broiled one like this with a little bit of spice to it. All right, we got our breadcrumbs going on. And at home, when you're doing this in your oven, you want it to bubble. You'll notice that the topping will kind of bubble around the sides of the oyster when they're nice and ready. I like to do a little lemon squeeze on top, and that's it. Season as you go. Make sure to add salt, and you're kind of layering the flavors with this topping as you go. If you've got octopus or lobster, whelk, there's all different kinds, calamari, you can add all types of different things using the same method, and it really works wonderfully and has really great spice, and works for any type of seafood, really. Starting to get some bubbly here. We also, I kind of breeze through using herbs, but always use fresh herbs when you can. I mean, most of the time, I would say 99% of the time we're using herbs in the restaurant, it's always, it's going to be fresh herbs. We rarely use dried herbs. They're so much nicer. When we're adding in like leafier green herbs to a recipe like this, we tend to not cook them for too long. Thyme is one of those herbs you can cook a little longer than normal, but other herbs kind kind of fresh herbs you want to add towards the end of the cooking process. That's a good way to cook. Getting some good color here. We're getting some bubbling, which is good. And we're going to present these on, we've got some really beautiful herbs from Wholesome Greens, which is our local herb farmer extraordinaire. And we've also got some spices in the salt just to make it look nice. We've got lemon, and we're just going to line these in here. Again, the salt, it helps keep the oysters upright so nothing spills out. And just a good way, it's a good look for oysters. The other thing is you'll find that when you're buying these farm-raised oysters, you're probably going to pay the exact same amount as you would for other, other oysters that you're not as familiar with, whether they're wild or whatever. And you really, you're paying in the store about $1.50 a piece for the oysters. So you want to make sure that you're not having to throw out oyster after oyster. It can get really expensive. But that's it. We've got, we're ready to eat these. Might want to let them cool just a little bit. They can be a little bit hot. But there it is. Thanks for joining me. We're really excited to open up this winter, and hope that you all will introduce yourselves when you're in the restaurant. I'd love to meet you in person. And thanks for joining in and letting us be a part of this event. We're really excited to be here. My name is Dean Neff. I'm the chef and owner of Seabird Restaurant. We're set to open in January or February of 2021. And Seabird is going to be a restaurant that really celebrates the diversity and seasonality of specifically seafood in our area. My real estate agent, Jeff Hovis, and I, back in late 2019, reached out to York Properties about this building. I'd been admiring it from afar, and we reached out to Brian Wallace and set up a meeting, and Brian Wallace and James Goodnight Jr. were there. James is the owner of the building, and we had a great conversation, and I was explaining to them, giving them the case for my new restaurant being in this space. One of the things that was really wonderful about that meeting is obviously James had an interest in wanting people to enjoy the space when it was finished. And I think he said something along the lines of, what better way for people to do that than to have a restaurant where people are bustling through all different times of the day. And so that was kind of the starting point. We ended up starting our planning for the restaurant, and in doing so, James and Brian actually asked me if I knew of any good restaurant designers so that we could really get the design of the restaurant right. We wanted to make sure that it felt like it had always been here, even though there's never been a professional restaurant in this space, to my knowledge. And they asked if I knew any designers, so I reached out to a good friend of mine and fellow restaurateur, Ford Fry, and he actually recommended reaching out to his designer, Smith Haynes. We called them and talked with them and hit it off, and have been working with them for the past 8 months or so, getting the space designed in a way that is exactly as we want it. And in doing so, there were a few things that I was initially requiring for the space. I knew that I wanted a semi-open kitchen. I knew that I wanted a chef's table that would look into the kitchen. I knew that I wanted the bar to be a little bit separate from the private dining room to create a different experience in the bar, maybe a little more raucous and loud and fun, and then having the ability to be more quiet in the main dining room. Also wanted to have a private dining room, and initially I remember Laurie from Maurer and Smith Haynes were kind of all like, you only have this much space, you can't have all of this. And so I really pushed for that because I wanted this space to be versatile. I knew that this is going to be the kind of restaurant where we are going to have people coming through early in the morning, lunchtime, dinner time, late night. It's such a central location in downtown Wilmington. We really had to think it through so that it was versatile enough to make sense any time of the day. We didn't want it to feel dark. We wanted it to be nice and bright. And Smith Haynes was really a great addition to our team, along with the general contractor, Old School Rebuilders, who has done a lot of amazing projects in this area. We brought together a team that has been really exciting to work with, and we're really excited to show you all how this is coming together. So we're going to do a little virtual tour. Okay, as we walk through here, we've got a column here, which obviously remains. There will be access on either side. There will be a seat here at the bar, and then guests, as they walk in, will, if they're heading to the main dining room, the chef's table, or the private dining room, they will go on either side of this column coming through. And also another touch from Smith Haynes is having these bookshelves that are going to be very high, bolted to the ground. We will have lots of books on one of them. We always have tons of cookbooks that we love looking at or inspired by. We'll also have some flowers, from one of our local flower growers that we really are good friends with, and just other kind of provisional items that we feel like would make sense here, or items that are from the Wilmington community that we feel like people would be interested in seeing will be on this other bookshelf. So again, the symmetry is happening. These bookshelves on either side, giving a natural feeling barrier for the space. And then as we walk through here, the bookshelf will end about here, and you're walking into the main dining room. As you can see with the windows, the main dining room runs from this column here, and it goes all the way past this brick and to this column here. So this entire space, we will be seating about 32 when we are eventually seating full capacity in the space. To start off, it'll probably be about half of that. But we've got a beautiful banquette that is there's actually two of them. There's one running this way against that bookshelf, and then we have another banquette running this way and ending about here. And we've got 4 tables in the center. This up here, if you can see, the chef's table. This table, it is going to be a space where we are able to have kind of family dinners, something that's even, on occasion they could be a higher end sort of experience, but something that's even more appealing than that to me is having a space where families could actually come, they can see what's happening in the kitchen, interact with the chefs, and have an experience that's maybe even more affordable, sitting up here and having that sort of interactive experience. So this is also something that will, probably function in events of teaching cooking classes. We can set up and we can have cooking classes from this station as well. Wine dinners, we can talk to the people seated and carry on conversations a little bit more easily as well. So I thought this would be kind of a good centerpiece of the restaurant to have, to add a little bit of versatility to what we're doing, and to also kind of invite people up so that they can kind of see what's going on in the kitchen and interact with the chefs, is kind of what we were hoping for. Moving on over, one of the other things I was really wanting to have in this space is a private dining room. And I think given the current state of things, it's actually going to be, you know, a good thing, whether it's, you know, now or a couple years down the road. Even hopefully things have changed, and we're not as concerned with the separation. But this space here, it will actually you'll be able to access it from a kind of side door, which will allow you to kind of come into the side door and immediately into this private space. The space here will seat about 14 to 12, and we will actually have another bookshelf here and banquette seating against the wall. As we walk through here, this is obviously going out the back door. We have a bathroom here. We have booth seating that is nice and out of the way in this corner. This is an entrance here to the kitchen. And we've got another one that actually, again, talking about symmetry, we've got another banquette that's identical to this on the other side of the other door going into the kitchen. Looking straight here into the kitchen, this is another thing we wanted to be able to break down the barriers between people cooking the food and the people eating the food. This is going to be a section where, you know, all of the hot food will be coming out and being plated. We've got a French top cooker here, which is going to be a steel plated cooking surface that it's really nice because you can cook on a lot of area. It gives you more area than a typical 6-burner range. We've got a really beautiful plancha that we're going to have here as well. And we've got a kind of a big oven, but nothing too fancy. We just, you know, this is going to be, we want it to be highly functional. And, you know, obviously, it's going to be a very different experience, I think, cooking and being able to see the people out here eating and enjoying it. Walking back here, we're going to walk back into kind of our prep and dish area. As you can see, we've got a lot of sink area and prep space back here. This will be, prep during the day. We'll also have kind of breads and things like that being baked off in the morning, probably mostly out of this area. We've got a dish area, and we've got a combination walk-in refrigerator freezer.
We're back. It ends at that point. Everybody hear me? Cool. Well, you just got to see right behind the scenes of an adaptive reuse right there. That was really cool. It works really, so it's a preservation conference. This is the last couple of minutes of it. You get to see the history, the preservation of a building. You get to see how people build a restaurant in a space like that, which is happening quite a lot all over North Carolina. I was really interested by that. I thought that was fascinating. I look forward to eating there very soon. Carolyn, are you on? I was wondering if we have a couple of questions.
Yes, we actually have one from chat, which is a really good question. And it says, it looks like the interior design is taking many nods from the 1920s. So are there any plans to include the Solomon name or Easter eggs that hint as its former use?
Maybe that's a Patrick question. Is he still on? Well, anybody else want to know that one? Oh, there he is.
Yes, I'm still on. Sorry, take reference to the Solomon name. Was that the original building name?
Yeah, that's the original store that was in there, right?
Yeah, I would say the space is inspired by its history, but I don't think it's going to have that sort of a direct nod towards the 20s. Like Dean was saying, we want the space to feel timeless and like it's been there for a long time. But yeah, we're not making direct references like that.
Okay, and back to design, when you designed the building, besides getting Dean's input, did you base it on anything else that you've done? Or was this completely custom to Dean's vision?
Yeah, I would say in terms of the way we think about laying out spaces, we sort of gain a knowledge of like, oh, this would be a good layout, this is good spacing and floor plan, but all of the furniture is custom for Dean. All of the banquetting, the bookshelves, all the detail work is all custom for Dean in this restaurant. And sometimes we'll repeat details from project to project, but this particular one is completely custom for Dean.
Okay. Now, another question for James. Do you have any plans to restore any other buildings here in downtown Wilmington?
See, I think the next thing we have is the empty parking lot across the street at 10 South Front. We've done a good bit of work stabilizing the ruins at the back of it, and plan to do some new construction there that kind of honors the what's left. And I don't know, I think COVID might have thrown a wrench in that, so we'll see what real estate looks like on the other side of this stuff.
Now, how much did COVID affect this building and this renovation?
Is that a Christopher question?
It might be. Yeah.
It slowed things down. Normally we're working on top of each other quite a bit. And so while we were kind of starting this, we were actually about 3/4 of the way through another project at 230 Princess Street. There was another renovation, and that was extended to, like, we actually had a crew that just kind of all of a sudden left for about 2 weeks because out of fear. And there've been people that have had sensitivities, either family members or themselves, of the crews that are working there. And so maybe they weren't working for a period of time, but it certainly slowed it down. And so it's really a mask only work environment. And we are really, doing what we can to keep our distance. We were paying very close attention. It's my job site at this point. I have the permits and it's my liability, and I feel responsible for a lot there. And so, we've got, masks are mandatory and we have to keep our distance, and we're doing what we can, but it's certainly slowed it down a bit. And, one thing we did actually on this project and others is we went ahead, since we have the second floor is still pretty wide open, we ordered everything we possibly could really get our hands on, all of the long lead time items. We've had a lot of tile stored there, and the tile is going to start in a couple of weeks. So we made sure that we ordered everything we possibly could, and we're storing it just because the supply chains are fickle, I'd say. So, but we're getting through. It's working out right now.
And last question, I guess, for Dean, how is your menu going to change seasonally, or are you going to keep a steady menu?
It will change seasonally, and that's kind of one of the interesting things that I want to really push forward in this menu with the food is the seasonality of seafood specifically. Seafood in this area is as seasonal as produce, and when you cook with the season, your food is generally going to be better, and menu will change daily to some degree based on what's coming through the door.
Cool. Well, anybody else got anything to add before we close this up? All right. Well, listen, thanks very much.
Great presentation. Great presentation. Really loved it.
Yeah. Like I say, this is on the conference. This will get another audience afterwards as well, and I'm going to share it with our volunteers and things to drum up some business, because I know they'll all come down when it's open. So thanks to everybody for doing this. This was great. I look forward to seeing it played back. And I think we're done. Clarissa is the person who has organized the conference, and it's over. I see she's already got a drink in her hand.
What are you talking about? That was so yeah.
All right. Well, thanks you all. Thanks so much for doing this. And
thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Thanks very much.
Thank you
Bye,
all.
everybody.
Bye. Bye.